It started at Brandenburg Gate in Berlin. Cold evening, everything lit up gold and dramatic. I'm leaning on a railing when overconfident dad in a Chicago Bears jacket unfolds this massive paper map. He squints at it, then at the gate, then back at me and goes, "So this is like Germany's Eiffel Tower, right?" His kids groan in perfect unison. One of them actually mutters, "Dad, that's a whole different country." A German lady next to us just exhales through her nose like she's aged 5 years in 10 seconds. I watch him proudly pose for a photo, thumbs up, yelling, "Say I fell!" Yeah, history may be complicated, but geography on that man's map is absolutely fan fiction. Later, outside a museum on Museum Island, a group is huddled by the steps, and I hear the tone. Instagram travel girl. Ring light on her phone, big hat, huge coat. Filming a story like it's a revelation. So apparently, she tells her followers, they built all these old buildings as like replicas for Netflix shows. Her boyfriend whispers, "Babe, I think they're older than Netflix." And she shushes him like he insulted her deity. The tour guide literally pauses mid-sentence and his soul briefly leaves his body. He finally says, very politely, "Some of these are from the 18th century, not streaming era." Naturally, she turns to camera and goes, "Guys, fun fact, Germany invented period dramas. In a Munich beer garden, long wooden tables, clinking steins, the smell of pretzels and grilled everything. Patriot uncle sits down across from me, flag-printed polo, already 2 beers ahead of his dignity. He slams his stein down and announces, "So what time are the Germans doing the choreographed lederhosen show for tourists?" The waiter just blinks slowly and says, "We are just drinking beer with friends, sir." Uncle looks offended, like the country failed to provide the scheduled entertainment he ordered in his brain. He leans toward me and whispers, "Bro, they're sitting on a gold mine and they don't even franchise it." Somewhere every Bavarian ancestor just collectively face-palmed into their sauerkraut. Outside Cologne Cathedral in the late afternoon, bells ringing, pigeons doing whatever unholy things pigeons do. A college bro in a too-tight hoodie is pacing in front of the entrance, AirPods in, looking stressed. He waves his friends over and goes, "So like, is there a VIP line for the church or what?" His friend says, "Dude, it's not a club." And a nun walking by actually stops in her tracks. There's this full 5 seconds of silence where even the pigeons seem embarrassed on his behalf. The nun finally smiles and says, "God does not have VIP section, only open doors." Bro shrugs and mutters, "Yeah, but the wait time could be optimized." Down at Hamburg's fish market by the harbor, the air smells like the ocean and questionable life choices. Wellness, Karen appears in a pastel puffer, clutching an organic juice like a moral certificate. She stares at a menu board and says to the vendor, "Can I get the fish, but like gluten-free?" The guy just blinks for a full beat and points at the literal fish lying on ice. A nearby seagull dives, steals someone's sandwich, and screams like it's personally offended by her order. The vendor just shrugs and tells her, "You can remove the bread with your hands, madam." Nature heard her request, and even the birds said, "Nope, we're out." On a cobblestone street in Dresden's Old Town, retired couples are doing slow, careful, tourist laps with cameras. Retired rich couple from Florida stands outside a tiny bakery, confused by a sign that says "Konditorei." The husband frowns and goes, "Why don't they just call it dessert place so more customers understand?" The baker, this gentle older guy, wipes flour off his hands and smiles patiently. He explains, "We call it konditorei because my grandfather did, and his father did, and so on." His wife leans in, whispering, "So it's like a family legacy word?" And his whole face lights up. Sometimes the smartest economics lesson is just, we kept the weird old name and people still come. I hear this one secondhand from a guide in the Black Forest, under tall trees and misty trails. A TikTok travel expert shows up in neon hiking gear that has never seen real dirt before. She films herself and says, "So this is the forest that inspired, like, all the Marvel movies, right?" The guide almost trips over a root just from pure internal shock. He gently explains the whole Brothers Grimm situation, fairy tales, folklore, centuries of stories. She nods, then tells her phone, "Okay guys, so think of it as the original cinematic universe." Even the moss on those trees probably rolled its eyes. In a tiny Bavarian village church, bells ringing softly, the whole square smelling like wood and snow. Loud Texas guy stomps up the steps in cowboy boots that echo like gunshots in the silence. He pushes on the old wooden door, finds it locked, and goes, "Dang, where do I complain about church opening hours around here?" An elderly lady setting out flowers just freezes, clutching her bouquet like a shield. She tells him, "It is closed for prayer and cleaning today, sir," in the calmest voice on earth. He sighs dramatically and says, "Well, back home we'd have a comment box and a toll-free number." Some traditions survive centuries specifically because nobody put a feedback form next to them. Up at Neuschwanstein Overlook, mountains in the back, castle glowing like it was photoshopped by a Disney intern. A honeymoon couple is arguing softly but intensely, selfie stick clutched like a microphone. The guy says, "But babe, where are the fireworks and the princess meet and greet? This looks nothing like the movie." A nearby local just chokes on his coffee at the audacity of expecting pyrotechnics on a Tuesday morning. She whispers, "So the real castle copied the Disney one?" And I swear a tour guide drops his brochure. He gently explains the timeline and reality, with that exhausted calm teachers have in June. Movie logic can be powerful, but not enough to backdate a castle. On a rooftop bar in Frankfurt, all glass towers and people pretending emails don't exist for 1 hour. A business consultant in a slim-fit suit is staring at the bill like it's a hostile takeover. He waves the waiter over and says, "Listen, you guys could increase tips by 40% with a loyalty app and some pop-up offers." The waiter just looks at him, then at the skyline, making that internal, "Is this my life?" face. Friends at his table are already sliding their cards over, desperate to exit the conversation. The waiter finally smiles and says, "Or you can just leave what feels right and enjoy the view." Not every culture needs a KPI for gratitude, bro. On a Rhine River cruise, sun going down, castles on hills looking like they're about to start singing. Freedom guy in an eagle print hoodie is pacing the deck, wine glass in hand, talking too loudly. He tells anyone within 10 meters, "Honestly, this whole river thing is cute, but nothing beats good old American rivers." A German couple nearby doesn't say a word, just stare at this man, rating historic waterways like fast food chains. His friend nudges him and whispers, "Dude, just enjoy the castles," but the speech continues. He finally raises his glass toward 1,000 years of architecture and declares, "Nice try though, Europe." Sometimes the loudest sound on the boat isn't the engine, it's the collective eye roll. At Leipzig train station, under that giant arched ceiling, where every announcement echoes like a prophecy, a backpack bro with a neck pillow still around his neck is studying the departure board like it's a boss fight. He mutters, "If they just made all the trains go in a loop, nobody would ever miss one again." A woman with a stroller glances over, visibly processing the concept of a nationwide hamster wheel rail system. His buddy nods, actually impressed, and says, "Dude, you should pitch that to the government." An older man nearby just chuckles and says, "We like arriving somewhere specific, not only around. Optimization has limits." and they usually stop right before you turn public transport into a carousel. Down on the Lake Constance Promenade, water perfectly still, Germany, Switzerland, and Austria all lurking nearby like a group chat. A bargain hunter in a bright windbreaker is haggling aggressively over a postcard. He tells the vendor, "Come on, man, you're practically in 3 countries. Give me a 3-for-1 border deal." The vendor gives him that patient look, then points across the water, naming each visible shoreline. The tourist pauses, realizing he's basically arguing with geography, not pricing. The vendor grins and tosses in an extra card anyway, 1 free for your multinational confusion. Sometimes the cheapest souvenir is the story that comes with your bad math. In Nuremberg's Old Town Square, Christmas lights half installed, movie posters still up from some medieval drama. A movie fanatic in a vintage film festival hoodie is circling the fountain like it's a shooting location. He squints at the buildings and says, "So where do they store the CGI parts when they're not filming?" A local teen skater literally stops mid-ollie and just stares at him. She explains in perfect English that the stone is real, the arches are real, the city is older than his favorite franchise. He nods slowly, then says, "Okay, but they at least edited the sky, right? Not everything you see needs a green screen credit." On a Freiburg street where trams glide by silently and everybody somehow knows exactly where to stand. Complainer dad, camera strap digging into his neck, watches a cyclist ring their bell at him. He grumbles, "So pedestrians don't get priority here. What happened to family values?" A woman with grocery bags steps aside, gestures at the clearly painted bike lane he's standing in. There's this brief, uncomfortable pause where he realizes he's the problem but refuses the lesson. She just smiles politely and says, "Our value is, do not get hit by bike." Culture shock sometimes arrives at 20 kilometers an hour with a handlebar. Up on the windy beach in silt, dunes behind us, North Sea doing its dramatic gray thing. A minimalist adventurer with 1 tiny backpack and too much confidence watches a guy set up a windbreak. He scoffs and says, "If you just embrace the wind instead of hiding from it, you'd grow more as a person." The local guy looks at him, hair whipping sideways, blanket flapping like a flag of resignation. His kids huddle behind the windbreak, clearly choosing comfort over character development. The dad finally replies, "We grow as people by not having sand in our sandwiches." Some enlightenment simply involves bringing the right amount of fabric. In a quiet spa town thermal bath, steam rising, everything whisper level, calm, and weirdly sacred. A wellness influencer in a designer robe is recording whispered affirmations into her phone. She asked the staff, "Could you, turn the water a bit more alkaline for my detox content?" The attendant's face does a full 3-stage evolution as she tries to process the request. A group of older locals just float silently, absolutely not invested in the pH of their relaxation. Finally, the attendant says, "The water is as it comes from the earth, we do not season it." Somewhere her ancestors nodded and went, "Yes, please stop trying to edit the springs." At a massive street food market in Berlin, neon lights, smoke, and 20 languages all colliding at once. A cruise tourist in a matching windbreaker set is staring at it. A currywurst stand baffled. He leans over to me and whispers, "So which stall sells the authentic German cheeseburger?" The vendor in front of us just freezes, tongs hovering over sizzling sausage. People in line collectively turn their heads like a slow, synchronized stage cue. The vendor finally smiles and says, "We do have cheese, we do have meat, we just do not call it that." You can bring the cruise mindset inland, but the menu doesn't have to cooperate. Near the top of Zugspitze, clouds below us, snow crunching, air thin enough to make decisions weird. Florida Man variant is wearing shorts, sunglasses, and the exact level of confidence that predicts disaster. He laughs and says, "If you guys just flatten this out a bit, you could build an insane water park." A mountain guide nearby actually laughs once, sharply, like a bark. He gestures at the cliffs, the snow, the vast drop that would gladly collect one more overconfident tourist. Then he says, "The mountain already has many ways to make you wet and cold." Nature heard the business pitch and responded with gravity. On Heidelberg's old bridge at sunset, castle glowing above, students and tourists blending into one big chatter cloud. A first-time traveler is craning his neck at the ruins, camera dangling from his wrist. He asks the guide, "So when they fix it up, are they going to modernize it with, like, glass balconies?" The guide just smiles, the kind of smile you get from explaining the same thing for 20 years. People around us go quiet just to hear how he's going to handle this architectural blasphemy. He replies, "Sometimes we leave things imperfect to remember how long we have been here. Not every broken wall needs a renovation. Some are just very old sentences still being read." In the palace gardens at Potsdam, fountains going off on schedule like disciplined, watered soldiers. Overconfident dad returns, new jacket, same energy, walking around with a streaming stick for his relatives back home. He narrates loudly, "So this is basically Germany's version of that one Marvel headquarters, right?" A tour guide stops mid-speech, looks at the Baroque facade, then back at this man rewriting history. The whole group goes quiet, even the kids, like we're about to witness an international incident of pure nonsense. The guide finally says, "It is our version of an old palace where people once lived, not superheroes. Bro, not every big building needs an origin story and a cinematic universe." Inside a packed Oktoberfest tent in Munich, the air is half oxygen, half beer, and 10% accordion. Instagram travel girl reappears in a dirndl that still has the price tag string tucked in. She waves a server over and goes, "If I tag you in my story, do I get an influencer discount on this liter?" The server just sighs internally, hefting another massive glass onto the table. Her friends look at the overflowing bench, the chaos, and the zero space for brand deals. He just says, "You already get something free, the music," and walks away before the negotiation round 2. Not every festival desperately needs a promo code. At an industrial museum in the Ruhr area, old machines everywhere, rust turned into art and history. Patriot Uncle is reading a plaque about coal production and nodding like he personally supervised it. He turns to a small crowd and announces, "You know, if they'd just copied our system, they'd have been #1. A group of local retirees who literally worked in those factories exchange the slowest look I've ever seen. One of them steps forward, smiles, and says, "We did okay for ourselves without being #1. The room gets quiet again, but in that respectful, heavy way. Sometimes the strongest flex is just, "We survived, we changed, and we're still here." Finally, at a rest stop off the Autobahn, cars whooshing past like they're in a different dimension of speed. College bro leans over the map board, tracing the lines of the highway with his finger. He says, "If they charged admission for just watching the cars, they could turn this into a theme park." A trucker sipping his coffee nearby almost laughs it out his nose. He shakes his head and says, "We prefer to keep it road, not roller coaster business." Bro stares back at the endless lanes, half disappointed there's no merch shop. "Some things are already wild enough without you turning them into an attraction, dude."